May 21st, the Twitter user Nerdy Asians brought Deadpool 2 to task for its inclusion of the character of Yukio, pointing out how she represented a long line of Western media featuring spunky Asian characters with color highlights in their hair to help define their spunkiness. This caused a minor movement as people discussed the association of dyed hair streaks as a degenerative media trope. But what I don't think Nerdy Asians realized was that they were onto something much bigger, something that I've noticed for a long time, and something that I've wanted to bring to the attention of the world to show you how deep the rabbit hole really goes, as I introduce you to the Goth Rebel Dream Girl.
Are you drunk enough yet to sleep with me? Answer the question!
You gotta love to be gone back yet. Love says that I've been told to grab it.
So I'm sure many of you have heard of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. The term was coined by film critic Nathan Rabin during his review of Elizabethtown to describe Kristen Dunst's character. The term stuck and came to define the archetype as seen in dozens of different films across all different eras.
I like to listen to songs in my head.
Sorry.
I paid the cab driver in buttons.
When did you first suspect you were dating a Manic Pixie Dream Girl?
Everything seemed so perfect at first. You know, she was cute, but quirky and awkward. On our first date, she said she wanted pancakes for dinner. But I felt alive. But then after a few months, she can't feed herself. She can't pay bills. She just wonders at the marvel of every moment.
In case you aren't familiar with the archetype, just think about every character Zooey Deschanel usually plays.
Hello. I came home early.
Jess! What?
I'm doing sexy things with the pillow. I'll pick that up later.
And she's going out to find a rebound. Who's that girl? It's just...
Wait, did you just make up a theme song for yourself?
You, Skyler. Said I need rebound sex, and it totally worked. He asked me out.
They're usually defined by their overly quirky personalities and their abilities to help soulful, brooding, artistic men embrace the greater mysteries and adventures of the cosmos. Since this archetype has been identified, it's managed to slowly die out in media, with its last major appearance being in the young adult coming-of-age movie Paper Towns, which was designed as a deconstruction of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope. But maybe that doesn't really matter because now they've moved out of the movie screens and into Brooklyn. By extension though, the Goth Rebel Dream Girl has not been very well explored, despite its ubiquity in the world of animation. The Goth Rebel Dream Girl is typically a supporting character who's a potential love interest, or at least an object of affection for the main character. Typically she's defined by her sass, her alternative sense of style, that will include punk or goth clothing, or anything that defines a sort of niche counterculture aesthetic. Usually she's athletic or sporty, and the whole idea is that she has this kind of down-to-earth, girl-next-door kind of appeal. These characters, whether intentionally or by design, tend to become fetish objects, something that is coveted and desired by the fanbase of whatever piece of media the archetype appears in, and shows up again and again in weird fetish art. In terms of characters that fit into the GRDG archetype, here are a few I've observed. Go-Go Tamago from Big Hero 6, Sabine from Star Wars Rebels, Wildstyle from the Lego Movie, Jailbreak from the Emoji Movie, Claire Nunez from Troll Hunters, Cersei from Generator Rex, Fontaine Necton from The Deep, Triana Orpheus from The Venture Brothers, Lucy Loud from The Loud House, Rosaline the Vampire Queen from Adventure Time, Samantha Manson from Danny Phantom, Mai from Avatar The Last Airbender, Raven from Teen Titans, Gwen from Total Drama Island, Joan of Arc from Clone High, Rogue from X-Men Evolution, Wendy from Gravity Falls, Jessie from Undergrads, Enid from OKKO, and Jane from Daria. Now this list is by no means comprehensive, but they are all the ones I could find. Now the reason I think this archetype exists and is so prevalent in the animation world is basically because animators are sad and lonely people. The craft of animation is very long and time consuming. A dedication towards this craft usually comes at the expense of something else, which is usually social contact. So of course, we have the long-standing trend of animators drawing their dream waifus into their work. I think we all know the archetype of the introverted artist who just wants to draw cool cartoons, but doesn't want a normie girl who doesn't understand his needs, or what's so brilliant about Chuck Jones or Hayao Miyazaki. His desk is littered with figurines and collectibles that make him so unique, as his collection of artifacts lets him express his incredible passions. So while this person may not necessarily find their dream hipster girlfriend in real life where they have to settle for normie Nancy, that doesn't mean that they can't draw their dream girl in animation, because in the world of animation, anything can happen. That's my theory, at least, as to why this archetype exists, and is so prevalent, and again, it ties into the original tweet with the Asian girls and their colored hair streak. Many of the GRDGs tend to be Asian, because of course many an animator spends their childhood raised on a steady diet of cheap anime, so of course Asian girl tends to fit into the desired fetish palette in creating the Goth Rebel Dream Girl. The best example is taking a look at Go-Go Tamago's original design from Marvel Comics versus her redesign in the animated Big Hero 6 movie, where she goes from becoming a more traditional superhero to a punk rebel design that is loved by fetish artists across the interwebs. It all feeds into something I call the Craig McCracken-Faust fantasy. In case you don't know, Craig McCracken is a prolific animator who's worked for several decades. He's done everything from work on Dexter's Laboratory to creating the Powerpuff Girls and also creating Wander Over Yonder, which unleashed this upon the interwebs.
I'm not your girlfriend or the frightened princess. I'm not a little bird who needs your help to fly. Nope. I'm the bad guy.
And yeah, I guess Lord Dominator also counts as a RDG as well. Now Craig McCracken is married to Lauren Faust, another prolific animator responsible for many things, but most importantly, the very successful reboot of My Little Pony. And if you could take a look, she's like the real-life personification of the RDG, and easily the fantasy ideal that every lonely male animator would like for their wife/girlfriend. An ideal to aspire towards in their own personal and professional life. Now, I'm not here to shame anyone for liking or creating these kind of characters, or start some kind of Twitter hashtag claiming that they need to be purged from the world of animation. I'm just here to point out how they are a pervasive, ubiquitous trend, but I do think that there is a darker side to the Goth Rebel Dream Girl fantasy archetype. That itself is tied to the many cases of sexual harassment that are unfortunately very common in the animation industry. Such examples as the firing of the creator of Clarence, Skylar Page, after he was accused of groping animator Emily Partridge, the termination of Chris Savio, the creator of Loud House, from his own series after several sexual harassment allegations, and of course John Lasseter stepping away from running Disney Animation after the numerous sexual harassment complaints for inappropriate touching, hugging, and kissing many of the female artists who worked at Pixar. It's something we see again and again in the animation industry, and my theory as to why we see it happen so often is because the girls who tend to usually work in the field tend to fit the bill of real-life versions of the RDGs. So you have animators drawing out their fantasy of their desired objects of affection, while those objects of affection work alongside them. And when the feelings of loneliness and horniness collide with the power and financial dynamics of office life, then you have a disaster waiting to happen. So what is the solution? Should there be some kind of hashtag movement to permanently ban animators from creating these characters? Should we publicly shame introverted people for creating characters en masse that reflect their deepest fantasies and wish fulfillment? I don't think shame is a particularly effective tactic. We've had 8 years of the gilded liberal paradise under Obama, which saw the rise of several left-leaning media titans like BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, Upworthy, and even traditional media fixtures like MTV chasing the get woke or go broke mentality, constantly churning out a never-ending stream of progressive news stories and videos. A never-ending crusade to spread wokeness and teach men to respect women and stamp out misogyny, because if we could somehow get that message through, all of the bad stuff will go away. But the problem is, people are fundamentally selfish. We've seen self-proclaimed male feminists like Chris Hardwick and Josh Whedon being forced to reveal their real colors, and these slogans of gender equality just become blank jargon to parrot and masks for guys to hide their real motives and justify their skeevy behavior. The thing is, we all see things from our own limited perspective, where we are the heroes of our own stories. Fundamentally, we are social animals that crave physical interaction, attention, and affection, and when deprived of those things, we tend to go a little crazy, which is why isolation is one of the worst punishments that can be administered to another human being. So at the heart of all this harassment in the animation world, I think there's a beating core that often gets overlooked, and that's a crushing sense of loneliness and denial. I think one of the best, most honest explanations for the rationale that leads to such behavior is Dan Harmon's apology towards his inappropriate attitude and harassment towards community writer Megan Gans when he was running the series before being fired. In his apology, he bears some greater truths that go beyond simply having a traditional 1950s misogynist attitude.
In 2000 whatever, I can't remember, 2009, 2006, 2000 something, I had the privilege of running a network sitcom. And I was attracted to a employee. I really want to be careful about that language. I think a huge part of the problem is a culture of feeling things that you think are unique and significant because they're happening to you, and saying things like, I had feelings for, and I fell for, and all these things. I mean, the most clinical way I can put it in fessing up to my crimes is that I was attracted to a writer that I had power over because I was a showrunner. And I knew enough to know that these feelings were bad news. That was easy enough to know. I knew that they ran the risk of undercutting people's faith in my judgment, her faith in her talent, the other writers' respect for me, the entire production, the audience. I knew that I wasn't doing anybody any favors by feeling these things. And so I did the cowardly, easiest, laziest thing you could do with feelings like that, and I didn't deal with them. And in not dealing with them, I made everybody else deal with them, especially her. Flirty, creepy, everything other than overt enough to constitute betraying your live-in girlfriend to whom you're going home every night, who is actually smart enough and respectful enough to ask you, do you have feelings for that young writer that you're talking about, that you're paying all this attention to? And saying to her, no, because the trick is if you lie to yourself, you can lie to everybody. It's really easy. And so that's what I continued to do, telling myself and anybody that threatened to confront me with it, that if you thought what I was doing was creepy or flirty or unprofessional, then it's because you were the sexist. You were jealous. I was supporting this person. I'm a mentor. I'm a feminist. It's your problem, not mine. It's you're the one that actually is seeing things through that lens. And so I let myself keep doing it. And it's not as if this person didn't repeatedly communicate to me the idea that what I was doing was divesting her of a recourse to integrity. I just didn't hear it. And it's because it didn't profit me to hear it. And this was, after all, happening to me, right?
There's a profound sadness to this apology, something bolstered by the entitlement of his position. Dan Harmon is not what most would consider a conventionally attractive person. He's an alcoholic. He's overweight and has a beer belly. If you saw him working at a local checkout lane, you'd probably want to avoid eye contact. But because of his comedic writing achievements, he's gained a status that places him above other failed 40-something alcoholics who strip off their clothes at public events. And because of those achievements, when Dan Harmon sees the GRDG of his dreams, who is a writer working under him, who he has power over, he feels that she should warrant a reciprocation of his affection, to give him the relationship he believes he deserves. And because of his one redeeming trait that cancels out all of his faults, because it put him in a position of power, he was also in a position to abuse that power to try and get what he wanted. But that's not the world we live in. Every person we find ourselves infatuated with or attracted to will not be guaranteed to feel that way back. No matter how entitled we may feel towards that affection, they are under no obligation to reciprocate it back. That is just a fundamental fact of life that everyone needs to learn to deal with, no matter what their race, gender, or sexual orientation might be. But some people can't deal with that fact, and in their desperation to fill the emotional hole driven by their social need for physical affection, they take things too far, and another Me Too story gets its wings. It doesn't help that we've been fed so many narratives featuring guys going after their one true love again and again and again, and what would normally probably constitute harassment in the real world is considered romantic. Just imagine if something like Scott Pilgrim played out in real life. If a socially inept loser like Scott went after the GRDG of Ramona Flowers, but because the story didn't demand it, he never won her over. Think about how uncomfortable his continued persistence starts to become as he orders Amazon package after Amazon package just to force her to visit him. So is there a solution to stop the Western world of animation from creating GRDGs so poor people don't obsess over them as an unattainable ideal to fill the emotional holes in their hearts? I don't think so. I think shame and guilt are very poor motivators to force people to do what you want. For example, Dan Harmon eventually got the GRDG girlfriend of his dreams in comedian Erin McCarthy, but their tumultuous relationship, as covered in the Harmontown podcast and movie, was something that was ultimately so toxic for both of them that the best thing that ever happened was when they eventually divorced and split up for good. So even if you do get to fulfill your fantasy, it may decay into something that becomes destructive and ultimately toxic. And maybe that's the truth no one likes to hear, that a fantasy is ultimately a fantasy and not indicative of real life. It's an ideal, but to pursue something that is not tangible in real life, to fulfill some kind of deep-seated emotional need, is a recipe for disaster. But this is a lesson that can't be taught in a hashtag campaign. It's not something that can be transmitted in a BuzzFeed article. It's a personal lesson everyone must learn on their own. So to you, dear viewer, if you have some JDRG fantasy girlfriend you obsess over in the fictional world, and see something that reminds you of that in real life, I ask that you make sure that you always take a step back and ask yourself, is what I want and desire something that will ultimately make them uncomfortable? And if the answer is yes, then it might be a good idea to withdraw yourself before someone gets hurt.